Welcome to A Plan for That podcast, where each week co-hosts Erin and Ryan will meet with progressive organizers, activists, and leaders. Together, we will educate, invigorate, and elevate the progressive movement. When we unite our voices, an army of progressives is possible. Ryan, I don't know about you, but I've got to react to the impeachment trial in one way and one way only. Are you ready? Who among us hasn't borrowed clothes that don't fit, half stammered through a totally made-up speech off the top of your head in front of the United States Senate? Am I right? I mean, he probably woke up this morning and thought, I know what'll be fun. I'll just wing it in front of millions and millions of people.
Well, to be fair, that's what Ted Cruz does every day when he wakes up, so...
Yes! I love it! Right? So, yeah, things are a little interesting right now. I really don't want to lose sight of two really important things that are going on. First and foremost, Ryan, let's take a moment to give congratulations to the Progressive Caucus in the United States House.
Yeah, they did a great job this week for sure.
Hell
Securing
yes!
that commitment for $15 an hour is a huge deal.
Well, and the checks. Don't forget the checks.
Oh,
all of our phone calls, all of our outrage. It all worked. Yay, yay, yay.
It's like Ayanna Presley said today. Progressive organizing works. We got to stay on it. Got to stay, the grassroots pressure definitely works when it comes to people in office in the United States. We just got to keep it up.
I am so grateful that we have progressive leaders like Miss Ayanna Presley. And on the other side of things, we have an entire party, with the exception of five people, you guys, who decided that democracy is, not really worth it. And they would much rather uphold a criminal, a traitor, and a seditionist, in effect becoming complicit themselves. Ryan, I can't with this party anymore. It's dead to me.
Well, I mean, look, if it took this long for them to be dead to you, I got nothing for you.
Right.
I'm not going to just sit here and make quips all night, but just to make a long story short, the Republican Party's been dead as we've known it for a long time. They have absolutely no leg to stand on when it comes to any of this. And man, if you thought that they were going to be the ones that came riding to the rescue when it came to the impeachment of the second impeachment of Donald Trump, man, you got news today that 44 out of the 50 of them are they're not good. Yeah,
no. And there's not really a good argument, right? I mean, we heard actually today, and this is real, you guys, if you haven't watched the painful production of the Trump defense team, what they actually did in the event of Mr. Castor is they actually used wording from the Constitution itself to prove the case that the Democrats have put before us. So I don't know if, Attorney Castor is maybe working for the Democrats, but he did a great job of that.
Look, I'm not sure what else you say. It was a bad day to be a lawyer for them, man. I don't know. I don't know what law school they went to, but they probably don't want them back. I'm a little surprised that we haven't already heard the president's not planning on paying them.
Right. I know. I think Mr. Elias said it perfectly for me. And you gotta follow him if you're not following him yet. He is not only a great lawyer, a comedian, he is a hero to democracy itself. He has been fighting and winning case after case for democracy. So Mr. Mark Elias said, and this is a real quote, that bar thing that I had to pass and was so excited about maybe wasn't such a big thing.
That's funny.
Oh, it's so important. We gotta laugh or we'll cry. Am I right,
No, you're
Ryan?
absolutely right. I agree. Oh, man. It's like beating your head against a wall every time a Republican talks. It's like what was that movie, Miracle on 34th Street? Was that the one where every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings?
It's a Wonderful Life. But
right, well, look.
Yeah.
First of all, this is very much not a wonderful life. This is not a wonderful timeline. This is exactly what we knew the Republicans were going to do. Every time a Republican lies, a white supremacist gets his hood. There's a way to go about this if you're the Republicans, and they have missed the mark so far. in public opinion, in everything. They're garbage. They have not figured this out.
Seriously, and I know that it's not going to shock our listeners, but it may shock friends and family to find out how many Republicans really are involved. Like, I'm waiting for the indictments, Ryan. It's going to be the whole story.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath on that because of the amount of people they have in the judiciary. They've got a lot of people on their side. They've installed quite a system to shield themselves. I just started a book today, Kill Switch by Adam Gentleson.
Yes.
A very, very good book. I'm very much thoroughly entangled in this thing. And it's talks just about that, how they've insulated themselves using the power that they've taken as the minority. And that's exactly what they're going to keep doing. They're going to keep insulating themselves. This is how they work and how they've worked for 40 years. They take minority power, and I mean longer than 40 years, but they take minority power and then they shield themselves with it as though they're some, holy artifact of American government. And there's just nothing further from the truth. So as much as I would like to see indictments on some of these guys, they're going to be around a long time, and we're going to have to organize to beat them.
Well, I got 2 words for that to help everybody kind of cleanse their palate before our short little break. And that is kill the filibuster is number 1. And then number 2 is, and I know you guys are getting ready for this, call witnesses. Call witnesses, Democrats. What are you doing?
Well, no, let's be careful. That means that Lindsey Graham's going to call Joe Biden and a list of other people. Because I'm sure there's a whole lot of
right.
constructive things that are going to be said in that defense there. If today's any indication, then this is off to a rip-roaring good start.
Oh yeah, it's comedy at its worst. I mean, watching democracy crumble before our eyes is just a laugh a minute.
Might as well be written by Adam McKay, and Will Ferrell should be starring.
Yeah, seriously. Also, I want to hearken to what you said about Lindsey Graham because I, myself, put out a pretty darn good tweet about this. That was one of the Trump defense lawyers, and I forget which one, Ryan, because honestly, they were just kind of a rolling joke on wheels for me. But one of them said that we need to call witnesses. There's no evidence and there's no witnesses, and it's not a real proceeding, okay? And so I wrote the tweet, okay, Trump's lawyers just said we need witnesses. Lindsey Graham is probably screaming, oh, God, no witnesses.
Yeah, look, no one is going to be happier with an unfair trial than the Republican Party, especially Lindsey Graham. But let's be honest here. There's so many different ways that this could go wrong for the Democrats, and it looks like that they're off to a really good start. I'm really happy with the way Jamie Raskin has handled this so far. He's an expert at what he's doing. You look at the cast that they've put up there as their managers; they're doing a great job. So I'm excited to see where that goes. But I mean, for now, it's the story today is obviously the clown show that is the Republican side. But as this moves forward, I'm going to be excited to see if you have more people that step up after this farce is done from the Trump defense.
Yeah, I have to give a shout out to Bill Cassidy for at least being a human today and listening to words and following logic. We'll see how far that takes us. But for right now, good on you, Bill Cassidy. He's the person, if you guys didn't catch the the screaming show that Ryan and I are talking about, where lawyers incoherently babbled and yelled at us for almost an hour and a half. That was the one Republican who defected from the last time they took a vote on whether or not this was constitutional. Spoiler alert, it is constitutional. And Ryan, I'm going to tell you where we're headed next. We're going to hear about someone who always listens to words and definitely has a plan, and her name is Tashara Jones. So stick with us, guys.
I'm Tashara Jones. I was born and raised in St. Louis. We need to say yes to the St. Louis we could have. Say yes to a St. Louis that's ready to tackle the 21st century. You should be able to succeed here, regardless of your skin color, who you love, your documentation status, or what language you speak. I want to build a city where everyone feels welcome, and I know that's what we can create together. Tashara Jones for mayor, for a new St. Louis.
You know, Ryan, it's just such a breath of fresh air to hear someone who says the hard things that need to be said, like Tashora Jones. I am so excited to look at her get elected as mayor in St. Louis. Come on.
Absolutely. All in on that.
It's going to be perfect. And I know someone who also is a fan of Tashara, and she is our special guest. Her name is Chris Ferry. And let me tell you, you guys, we are starting something really exciting. We gave you a little teaser last time about our docuseries that was coming up, and it is all with Chris Ferry. She is not just the most intelligent researcher on Twitter. She is an engineer, a moral and ethical philosopher, a researching maven, and a writer and student of life. Chris, I couldn't be more excited to bring you on and tell us how to save democracy.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Actually, how I started with this, I'm going to go to my childhood, and basically I saw a lot of racism and anti-Semitism, and I wanted to have peace and equality for everyone. And then another interesting thing that happened to me when I was 14, around there, I saw an expert on 60 Minutes who talked about America being in decline as far as democracy was going, and that had a lot to do with the inequality at the time. And interestingly, no one else was talking about that. So I was wanting to know more about that. Mm-hmm. And I've spent my life basically studying how to have peace and equality. And it's tied up with why American democracy has been in decline for the last 50 years.
Now, I know that, Chris, you and Ryan are going to go off on this because you have way more historical perspective than I do. But, Chris, you and I were talking about just how far back this goes. Ryan, how far back do you think this goes? I want to see if you and Chris are at the same page here.
I would say probably pre-Civil War, probably right after the founders died.
Okay, Chris, what do you say?
Actually, there are various points. I'll agree with Ryan. We can actually take this back basically to the colonization of this country as well, because we're relitigating some of the issues that we've had from the very start of this country, from before the founding. So there are various periods where we can look to see parallels.
Absolutely. And I would go so far as to say, as the non-historian in the group here, I would go so far as to say it could be, in fact, why our Declaration and our Constitution had baked in problems. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. From the start, we've had genocide of Native Americans. We had slavery before we ever got founded. That's been since almost from colonization, period. And those two factors have created a whole systemic white supremacy system. And we're still dealing with that today. And most of the policies in our country today, most of our policies in our country today actually have roots in systemic racism.
Yeah, I hear you. And Ryan and Chris, it really is coming to a head right now. And here's one thing I would like to say to all of you, all of our listeners everywhere, is we need to deal with this. This cannot be made to be too uncomfortable, too unpopular, too politically dangerous. We have to deal with this, Chris. What is the risk if we push it yet again down the road?
Well, we've been kicking the can down the road for so long. From the founding of writing the Constitution, they kicked the can down the road. Then this wasn't resolved after the Civil War. Lincoln died, and it was over Easter weekend when he was assassinated, and he died at that point. And there was a feeling at the time that his death, at least some of the country felt, that his death actually washed away the sins of slavery. And there were calls for unity, just like we're seeing now. And because we haven't dealt with the sins of our past, we're going to keep repeating them. And if we look at the genocide and the 10 stages of genocide, polarization is number 6 of 10 stages. And that we can see that polarization before the Civil War, we can see the polarization now. And another problem with countries who have had previous genocides and haven't come to terms with them, their history shows they're much more likely to then have more genocide. So we've set ourselves up for mass genocide in the future, and we're seeing that with the...
You know, I want to get Ryan's take on that, because what you just said is so powerful. It's not just this president, okay? Come on, Ryan, bring it on.
No, for sure. I think that there's a number of issues. But I would ask Chris, what in your opinion, what would you say is the main issue, or was the main issue that got kicked down the can, or the can that got kicked down the road when the Constitution was written? What would you have seen changed?
Well, definitely the question of slavery. That our legacy is based on slavery, and we've never gotten out of that. And it should have been resolved, should have been abolished before they declared independence. But when the country was starting, when it had declared independence, they had the Articles of Confederation. Mm-hmm. And it was a loosely knit organization, and it wasn't going to last. And so they basically had to write the Constitution quite quickly. Otherwise, they knew that foreign powers were going to come in and take over. And that's what they were worried about.
So they were under the gun, is what it sounds like. What do you think?
Well,
Ryan?
I know that one of the issues that was a major one with the Articles was the fact that you needed a supermajority, essentially, to decide basically anything. So the question of slavery would have been completely out of the question with the Articles of Confederation and the plan to build what is considered a modern democracy at the time, what was considered a republic. To build that, they needed to have the framework for a simple majority with equal representation, and that's where we got you got the bicameral legislature, and that the people say upheld slavery with the Senate, but that really didn't come into the filibuster in the mid 1800s when you're the early 1800s, when the minority really strengthened themselves. Now, the thing that I usually think about when we get to this point, and I won't go too long on this, is the problem with the democracy that's crumbling is minority rule. You have a majority which was designed to rule, to govern, with the will of the people, 50 plus 1, and you have the other side, which in the name of protecting itself, whether that's honest or not, attempts to derail and obstruct the governing of the country. And that's really, in my opinion, where you see a lot of these problems rise. That's where the problem of slavery rose for a long time. That's where the issue of civil rights lived and died for a long time, was with minority rule. I'd like to hear what you think about that, Chris. I know that's been a common thread throughout the history of the United States. What would be your take on minority rule and how that fits into the problems of today?
Oh, you're absolutely right. I totally agree with you, Ryan. The filibuster basically was there to stop civil rights. And it didn't start then, but that's when it was majorly used. And John C. Calhoun was really the person who came in and put in this minority rule ideology. And that's when the filibuster really got started. But it does come back to minority rule and this whole supermajority idea. And you're right, it was part of the Articles of Confederation. So we need to get rid of the filibuster. There's no doubt about it.
Yes. Now, I'm going to be everyone's favorite little devil on your shoulder here, because I would argue that the people who had the power were rich. And that continues to be the problem. What do you think?
Absolutely. There's two ideas here. There's the tyranny of minority rule, and there's tyranny of majority rule. And actually, the founders were concerned about both of those. And so we really have to be careful about power concentrating in the hands of certain groups.
Yes.
What we need to do is countervail power, offset power. And that's the key to saving democracy right there. That's how the New Deal actually saved democracy in the 1930s. It balanced the power of the wealthy corporate people against the power of the unions, and the other side was wealth taxes and things like that. So we have to have that balance.
I am so glad you brought that up, because Ryan, in our last episode, which will be dropping before this episode, so y'all will catch it, he and I talked about the FDR Democrats just disappearing. And then, Ryan, what did you tell us? Where did they go?
Well, like I said, they kind of vanished. They splintered into the ether into a bunch of different groups. So the primary thing that really went away was the American left really receded with the Red Scare in the 1950s with Joe McCarthy. It really became out of fear for your own life and livelihood, being associated with any kind of socialism or communism, really drove a lot of the American left into hiding. But more than that, the real progressive movement, it went away largely because of the reaction to the rise of the Goldwater Republicans and later the Reagan Republicans. They really took control, and the Democrats really became more reactionary. That was kind of the gist of what I was talking about.
Yes, yes. And so, Chris, I want to get your weigh in on one of the things that Ryan mentioned about the Democrats of the left being afraid to be associated with socialism. There is a conversation that needs to be had. We've made jokes about it, but now it's time to get serious. Socialism is not communism. Chris, tell us the difference.
Yeah, well, I think the way to go is to reframe this whole conversation and look at power concentration, because this is really the key. If we have power concentrating in the hands of a few, that's going to lead to tyranny.
Yes.
So what we need to say is that communism is basically power that is nationalized. The production, basically, it's mostly production, is nationalized. And that is going to create power in the government, concentrating in the government that's in the hands of a few bureaucrats. We don't want to nationalize a whole bunch of things. That's dangerous. But what we do need to do is we need to say that socialism, I don't like the term because it has such a negative connotation.
Mm-hmm.
I like the term social programs. We need social programs. We need to balance social programs against capitalism. And this is the way that we need to balance our government.
That's right. And Ryan, Chris isn't just an amazing researcher. She's also done a lot of work around messaging. And boy, could we use it. This is going to be something that we get into more and more in the series. Are you excited?
Absolutely. Messaging's a passion of mine. As someone who coaches persuasion and rhetoric, and I coach debate, this is something that's right up my alley.
That's great.
That's awesome. It's going to be a party up in here.
It's nice to work together.
I am just so excited, Ryan and Chris, to have these writings that Chris is going to be exploring with us over the course of our 4-part series. And while I really loved what I read, I kind of want you to break it down, Chris, because as you say, there is a lot of work to do to save our democracy.
Right. That's so true. And so I'm going to start with the current state of America. And actually, history shows that crises are actually the turning points of country and the government until there's a crisis or crises. And that's when people start organizing to reform the government. So this is one of the reasons we've had problems getting here, because not enough people have seen the crises that have been happening. People of color certainly have, but a lot of America hasn't. So now that we've got people's attention, we can start focusing on problems. So that's part of part one. And then the next article is going to cover the public's role in democracy and the trends of all governments. There's a pattern that we're following, and we need to get out of it. And Thomas Jefferson told us how to do it. So I'm going to be going over those points in part two, along with the philosophies that the oligarchs have and the narratives that they use, the racist narratives that they use to control people. And then article three is going to be on the three different oligarch cabals that have actually been plotting overthrow of the government for a very long time. Karl Rove told us in George W. Bush's administration that they were headed toward one-party rule, that was the plan. So they told us the plot a long time ago, and this is what's happening. And then the fourth part, we're gonna talk about how to save democracy and what that looks like, and we're gonna talk about messaging. We need new framing, a whole new narrative, and that's what we need to teach people, and we need to create a whole army of progressives out here to help reform the government.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you explained that all, because Ryan, we right now, and I always try to be happy, you guys, but this is serious. We are failing in saving our democracy right now, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, democracy is a very fragile thing, and anything that we can do to save it's a good thing. Chris, what do you think needs to get done?
Well, I think the first step has to be public education of where we're at.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree.
So and then you can't solve a problem unless first you have to have an awareness of the problem, and then you have to understand what the problem is, so that we're not attacking symptoms. Far too often I see people attacking symptoms versus getting to the actual roots of problems.
Yes.
So we need to explain that.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because we heard it a million times on the campaign trail, but people were trying to actually get across to America that Trump is not the crux of the matter. He is a symptom. He is a disgusting symptom, but he is a symptom.
Right. That's so true. And that's really an important point to make to people. 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, once Fox News started, shortly thereafter, I saw it as an authoritarian tool, and I knew we were headed toward overthrow or a civil war at that point, because there's only one way to go when you have a propaganda machine spewing racism, misogyny, demonizing Democrats, extreme polarization. And that's going to lead to either civil war or an overthrow. I've studied how democracies fall, and the propaganda machines are a huge part of any authoritarian regime. So you're headed toward authoritarianism at that point. So we have to destroy the propaganda machine.
See, Ryan, that's why I say on Fox News, I say sue them out of existence. They need to go. They got to go.
I totally agree. And that's part of why we want to break up big tech, too. There's a whole lot of avenues that we have here to break the propaganda machine from the right. I totally agree that along with public education, are the number one and number two things that we can and should do. But like I said, there's a ton of different ways to get it done. There's 100 different ways to skin this cat. And we should absolutely utilize as many of them as we can to get it done.
Well, here's the good news, guys. There are a lot of things to do, and Chris has listed them for us. So it's almost a map. In fact, I'm going to say it is a map. It's a map, isn't it, Chris?
That's true. I've been trying to simplify the entire message because that's what people need to hear. If it's too complicated, people aren't going to be able to do it. But if it's simple, this makes it easy for people to understand and easy for people to take and implement. So that's one of the things I've been trying to do in the writings that I've been creating.
I hear you. And the way that we met, Ryan, and then I want to hear how you met, Chris. The way that we met is I am a dark money enemy. Like, I am all over it. We're always like researching backgrounds on people. Who's the Coke machine? Who's the Mercer machine? And it's kind of frightening. It's not just the Republicans. It's both sides, and it's got to stop.
Very true.
And Ryan,
that's perfect.
How did you meet Chris? Because I know we've all been talking on and offline here.
Yeah, Chris and I have interacted semi-frequently on Twitter. I know that she's commented on some of the things that I've written. I've replied as much as I can. I don't think I was following you until today, Chris. And correct me if I'm wrong on that. But
that's very
it's
true.
one of those things where you realize you're not following somebody that you should be following.
Bad, Ryan, bad. No, I'm kidding. It happens.
I'm really terrible about it, and I really do apologize. But it's it's one of those things that, Twitter isn't life, but that's one of the places that we've interacted.
Yes,
right.
Yes, exactly. And actually, this is just a brief, total off topic. If people don't follow you back, sometimes it's because Twitter won't let them. I'm just putting that out there. Twitter won't let me follow you. I'm sorry. But Chris, I am so glad that you're breaking it down for us over the course of a series, because the one thing that we don't want to do, Ryan, we don't want to cram a whole bunch of information into one episode.
Absolutely
and
not.
Run the risk of either losing ears or losing the thread. Am I right?
No, absolutely. And look, this is going to seem a little contrived, so bear with me for just a second. I went to school to be a teacher. So I've worked in public schools for the last 5 years, other than my first year out of the public school system full time. But I still coach. I still work with kids. I still work in an educative environment. It's important to know that for a lot of people, you check out after about 5 minutes of straight information. You have to have the interaction. So and for some people, it's even less than that. So it's, knowing our audience, knowing that a lot of our audience are really smart people who are really interested in the things that we're saying. Even then, it's important to give them a break.
Absolutely. They've been organizing to elect an army of progressives, and sometimes that's a lot of work.
Absolutely.
So, Chris, why don't you tell us the very first part of the series in a little bit more detail? And this is going to be what we're bringing in a couple of weeks. Not next week, guys. Next week, I have another guest who is uniting progressives all across the nation. So excited.
Well, I'm really reformatting this some way you suggested I might do that. So it's changed a little bit from when I had talked to you earlier. The first part is the current state of America and basically how to turn crises into opportunities. So we're talking about the structural problems that have existed, and you mentioned Trump as being a symptom, which is so true. The decades of problems, last 40 to 50 years, basically have been a setup for some strongman to come in and take charge. So I'm setting kind of the rest of the series up by talking about the opportunities that we have, and then a little bit about the three main crises. There are certainly plenty more, but I'm talking about three main crises, and that would be the pandemic healthcare crisis, the economic crisis, and the racial crisis.
That is beautifully put. And Ryan, just a few of the things I saw in Chris's amazing work is Dark Money and Oligarchs, The Family, prayer breakfasts, nationalizing of Christianity as law as opposed to keeping church and state separate. I mean, she's got it all, man. It's going to take a while to get through it, but we're happy that we have her, and the work has to happen.
Absolutely. It's going to be a fun series. I'm excited to follow it. I'm excited to talk about it. I know we're going to discuss it quite a bit on the podcast.
Absolutely, Chris. And this is how we do it, you guys. You have to be armed with information and put it in a message that resonates with everyone. Like the 2,000 checks. That resonated with everyone, am I right?
No, you're absolutely right on that.
And I'm so glad that Democrats agreed that the $2,000 checks needed to be something that was delivered. So again, we congratulate the Progressive Caucus and everybody who had the strength to listen to them when they spoke.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
So what do you think, Chris, Brian? Are we ready to dig into the work that has to be done to save democracy? I'm ready to do it. I can't let it slide.
Absolutely. I am so ready.
I mean, look, I've got my sleeves rolled up already. I've been standing here with a shovel waiting to dig. So let's get into it.
Excellent. And that's what we'll get into next week, because we are out of time for this day. But it has been such a pleasure to have you, Chris, and we look forward to hearing the detailed map that you so wonderfully lay out.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. You take care, and we'll talk with you soon.
Good to chat with you, Chris.
Yeah, great to talk to you too.
Ryan, I am so excited.
I am too.
This is really going to be helpful. I mean, people are asking on Twitter all over the world. They're saying, like, what is it? Is it elect more people that are like this? Is it message this way, do that? You know.
Look, a lot of people are saying there's...
Oh, my God, no!
No, I'm excited too. I think it's gonna be a good topic to discuss. I think that there's gonna be a lot of things for us to tackle, and I think that there's gonna be a lot of issues for us to discuss on like what are the pitfalls, what are the roadblocks that we have to get through and get over on this. Because there's going to be a number of them. Anytime that you're trying to make significant change in a movement or in a country, it's going to come with things like this. So I'm absolutely 100% ready to dig into it. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. It's going to be super constructive. And I'm always down to talk policy.
Hell yes. And as far as I am over on this side, I'm so frickin' frustrated. I just need an action, and she's got plenty of them. So let's go.
Absolutely. Totally agree.